Okay, so we're back for part 2 of my January wrap-up. Before I continue with the books that I finished this month, I just want to mention a book that I read most of and ended up DNFing. I don't especially like doing this with books, but if I'm really not enjoying something, then I don't want to spend that extra time on it. I'm really sad about this book though, because it's one of those ones that I thought I was going to absolutely love. So many people adore this book. It's got so many 5-star ratings, but it also seems to be one of those books that divides people. If you adore this book, if it's one of your favourites, I do not think any less of you as a person. A lot of my friends and people that I know and respect on BookTube love this. It just wasn't for me. So the book was The Shadow of the Wind by Carlos Ruiz-Zafón. And this is a book that I brought with me from New Zealand because I thought that I was going to love it. I decided to listen to this rather than read the physical copy because I knew that I would get to it sooner that way. And I just found it to be very dull, not especially well written. Now that may have been more to do with the translation than with the author's work itself, but I just found that it really didn't have anything to recommend it to me. It's a book about books. I should have loved it. I just felt very little emotional connection to it. I didn't find it especially engaging. I got probably about 2/3 or 3/4 of the way through. Anyway, on with the books that I did finish. So I finally read David Mitchell's latest novella, which is Slade House. This is sort of spin-off of The Bone Clocks. You could read it if you hadn't read The Bone Clocks, but it makes more sense if you have read The Bone Clocks. And this book actually tied together and made a lot of things from The Bone Clocks make a lot more sense. It's structured more like a short story collection in some ways, but they are all very much linked. I don't feel like I can say much more without giving away what happens. There's a house and there are a couple of shady characters and we see the same and similar things happening over and over. It's very David Mitchell, but I would say that this is in some ways more satisfying than many of David Mitchell's other works because it really has that sense of being a whole, being a narrative that has a beginning, a middle and an end, so to speak. It's slightly unconventional because it's David Mitchell, but it makes more sense as a whole than I think maybe The Bone Clocks does, or even Cloud Atlas does. You don't have to go digging quite so much to find an inner meaning to it. The next book won the Costa Prize, and this was a very impressive read. It was The Loney by Andrew Michael Hurley, and this is a very gothic sort of novel. It has a very bleak setting to it. It's very slow paced as well, deals a lot with religion and with disability as well. It's about this young boy and his brother, and their family is very religious, and their religious community, the small religious community that they belong to, takes a field trip to this place called the Loney, which is very desolate, and they stay in this house and there's some sort of mystery going on at the house. There are some strange characters around this place as well. Nobody really wants them to be there, it would seem. The narrator's brother is mute and seems to have learning disabilities, and that ends up tying in. He's quite often getting the narrator into trouble and the narrator has to take blame. It's an interesting look at this community. It's an interesting look at brotherhood and what that means when one brother is much more capable than the other. I think that this was a very impressive debut novel and I'll be really interested to see what this author does next. Then I read an autobiography by Jeanette Winterson, which is Why Be Happy When You Could Be Normal. I read Oranges Are Not the Only Fruit last year, and so I thought that it was about time that I read the autobiography, which is the true version of the events that happened in Oranges Are Not the Only Fruit. It's quite a short book. Most of Jeanette Winterson's are. As always, she writes very beautifully. This is her story of coming out as gay. She was adopted and her mother especially was very religious. I got the sense that this book was very cathartic for her, that she dealt with a lot of issues surrounding her mother by writing about her. And she also talks about that process as well. So it has many, many layers to it. And Jeanette Winterson is just brilliant. So if you're interested in her work, especially if you've read Oranges Are Not the Only Fruit, I would recommend reading this. And if you've read this already, then go and read Oranges because it's also amazing. The next book was also a memoir. This was Fun Home by Alison Bechdel, who I adore. She is such a wonderful, wonderful woman and so very talented. Her artwork is so simple. She just uses this very limited colour palette, just the green and black and white. I'd previously read her second memoir, which is called Are You My Mother?, which is all about her relationship with her mother, funnily enough. This is all about her relationship with her father, who committed suicide when she was quite young. This is about her coming to terms with her sexuality and also realising her father's sexuality and that he had had affairs with men. This is chocker full of literary references done in all the right ways. I love the way that she uses the artwork and the words and doesn't overlap them. She doesn't just illustrate what she's writing, which should be true of all graphic novels, but it isn't always. She does it in a way that goes above and beyond any other graphic novels that I've read. Not that I've read a lot of graphic novels and memoirs, but yeah, this is definitely one of my favourites. Again, I feel like I read this over too long a period of time though. It would have been much better to have read it maybe a full chapter a night or something, but I ended up just reading a few pages and then going to sleep because I had this next to my bed, which is not a good way to get through novels or graphic novels or anything that's sort of longer format. So I'm thinking I might switch to reading poetry before I go to sleep. My next read was the new novel from Julian Barnes, which is all about Dmitri Shostakovich, the composer. And oh my goodness, this is definitely my favourite Julian Barnes that I've read so far. That said, I've only read The Sense of an Ending. I have read some of Arthur and George, but didn't get very far with it. I think I will return to that one at some point. I find the whole concept of that book fascinating. But anyway, we're talking about The Noise of Time, which is the title of Julian Barnes' new book. Like I said, it's all about Shostakovich. I'm fascinated by classical music, and I think that Shostakovich is one of the most interesting biographies of any classical serious music composer. For those of you who don't know, he was working and publishing music and performing music under Stalin, and he and Stalin had a very, I'd say, difficult relationship. I don't imagine that Stalin had a lot of great relationships with people, I mean, being a dictator and all, but it was very fraught in that Shostakovich would be in favour one day and then out of favour the next. And the beginning of the novel opens with him standing outside a lift outside his home at night with a suitcase because he doesn't want to be taken away by the secret police in front of his family. So he wants to spare his family that. And sadly, this is the story of so many people in Soviet Russia at that time. He doesn't get taken away by the secret police, but we do have this sense of fear throughout the novel, and we see various iterations of the Stalinist and communist regimes in the Soviet Union. So I think it's a really interesting insight into this world. It's so interesting to see this done in fiction, and I think that's a way that you can engage in history in a really emotional way, because sometimes history is too removed and it's difficult to understand and connect with because of that removal. So if you're interested in anything that I just said, go and read this book because it really is very, very good. The penultimate book is All the Birds in the Sky by Charlie Jane Anders, and this is quite a book. This is quite a book. It reminded me of David Mitchell quite a bit in that it really plays around with genre and with ideas of magic and science. It sort of belongs in the sci-fi and fantasy section, but at the same time it has a literary sense to it because of the way it winds these different aspects together. It is about two children, one boy who is a sort of master inventor and one girl who is a witch who can talk to birds, hence the title and hence the beautiful cover. When I started reading this, I had no idea what direction it was going to go in, and I still had no idea what direction it was going to go in, even when I was sort of 100 pages from the end. It was so surprising, so very different from anything I've read before, and another one that I recommend. All these books that I recommend, this is so exciting. The only thing that prevented me from giving this 5 stars, and I still might bump it up to 5 stars, it was more like a 4.5, was the writing. It was solid, but it wasn't really beautiful and lyrical. But I could forgive her because it's such an excellent novel. And finally, we have another graphic memoir, which is Long Red Hair by Meigs Fitzgerald, and oh my goodness, I love this so much. This is a graphic memoir along similar lines to Fun Home or Are You My Mother, but it's more about her growing up rather than her relationship to any one person. This deals with all the things that you would expect a coming-of-age graphic novel to deal with. It deals with friendship, it deals with sexuality, it has so many pop culture references, and I find myself patting myself on the back when I understood them. It's another book that does a really good job of showing, not telling, like Alison Bechdel does. For instance, we have this scene here where they're doing some sort of witchcrafty sort of thing. I think it's a sleepover. And then we've just got these little pictures, and there aren't any words to reference them, but if you've seen the film Labyrinth, then you'll recognise these little bits, and I recently watched Labyrinth for the first time, so I was quite pleased to see that. And there are multiple moments like that throughout, and I just think that that's a really clever way of doing it, because even if you don't get the references, and I didn't get all of them, it still makes you think about things in a different way. So along with the pop culture, you've got bits about history and things that she's learning. My only complaint about this was that it wasn't long enough. I read it essentially in one sitting. So yes, I want more of this, please. It was so wonderful. It's also an example of a bisexual memoir, which I haven't seen a lot of. So January was a really good reading month. There was only one dud in there, which was really a dud for me. A very dud, but the rest of the stuff that I read, I was very impressed with. I've really enjoyed reading new stuff this month because in December I did a lot of rereading. As always, thank you very much for watching, and I will see you next time.